And also, as usual, I will start the meeting by giving everybody some time to read the agenda. So feel free to start reading that, or reading the updates and reminders sections on the agenda, and you can start doing that right now if you like.
Tycho, do we want to start moving people in the meeting room or just keep people here? Meeting room is the one that
Meeting,
giving everybody.
Yeah, meeting room is where we should be.
Okay.
It's also limited who can talk in there, or is everybody able to talk in the meeting? I already posted a link to in the hashtag meeting text chat. You can open that agenda and look through. There's a list of updates and reminders. I generally leave people to read those on their own volition, and then open it up after that. Open it up after that to discussion and questions.
Question for you: do we have pictures of the swag? I don't know what if any has been released.
So I handed examples of the swag off to Jin, and he did get some pictures for me. I have yet to get them on the website, but I could probably show the chat real quick. Or actually, I will paste them into the end of the meeting agenda instead. So I'll do that spend a moment doing that while everybody reads up on the agenda.
Yeah. It's kind of like the equivalent of how we used to pass it out or, pass it around to look at it
Yeah, I mean, in lieu of being able to do that, I guess that's the best we can do right now. So there's the first picture copied into the Google, into the agenda. It's down at the end. I'm waiting for the other pictures to download. They're all huge. But there should be pictures of the individual items too.
Oh, that looks so good.
I am so hyped for this swag.
Nice.
On the swag, does it all say 2020 or just BLFC?
Absolutely nothing has the year on it.
Bless, 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 bless.
I don't think we ever really put the year.
Yeah. I don't think we ever have.
We have, but the last time we did it was in 2014. We haven't put the actual year or the name of the con on any of our swag since 2014 because we decided that we liked the swag being a little more subtle and a little less screaming the name of the convention.
That would explain why I don't remember. It's 6 years ago. This is a long time.
Also, oh my god, the battery pack is that one they're trying to push on YouTube ads for $120.
Yeah, it's definitely not $120, by the way, when you buy them in bulk from a supplier in China.
That is the same one.
It is pretty. It's actually the smaller version of the same one.
Not a scam product. Like we're not. Like
that lit mobile thing that keeps getting advertised on YouTube is a 20,000 milliamp hour battery. This one's 10, and it's physically smaller.
Can we make a knockoff commercial how ours is free with X con registration?
do it first. Doing a review.
I have the Adobe suite. Just toss that my way. I'll work on that for you.
So I registered for BLFC as Epic, and they sent me this cool battery pack.
I really like the grips on the side.
And totally, we're not going to say anything how any of us are affiliated. We're going to have like subtitled actual guests, not volunteer or con op.
It'll just be fursuit hands. They never show the face of any of the people anyway.
That's a good point, yeah. Also, sorry, I was a few minutes late getting in here. Could someone share to me what we're referencing here or tell me where to go to look?
In the meeting chat, just right above, you'll see text channels. It's going to be #meeting.
The very bottom of that in the Google Docs.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was looking for, is the Google Docs. Okay.
I could let us pin messages.
There we go.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Oh man, Delta's gonna love me. I get to reschedule my first class plane ticket to 2021 if it's pushed back again.
Which could easily still happen. Like I've said here in the updates, it's entirely possible, but we just don't know yet.
It's
Yeah.
okay. I'll be disappointed.
Without
Just
naming an
It's
event,
first class.
it's honestly not surprising. I know an event that isn't even sure that 2022 is a slam dunk. So, yeah, these kinds of things are happening. It's definitely for the best that we prepare to run it just in case they come out with a miracle vaccine by October. But don't be shocked if it takes longer than that. We just kind of have to roll with the punches.
Yeah, I mean, we can't just like we can't just pretend it's not going to happen and sit on our thumbs, because it still might. So we have to basically prepare for both possibilities. And like I mentioned here in the reminders or updates or somewhere in there, the best way to do that is to work on what we can that we know will just carry over if it does get postponed again. And then anything that actually is specific to October, we should probably hold off unless it either doesn't cost much money or doesn't cost much work.
So, quick question: when is the soonest deadline that, or what's the latest deadline on if we'd find out if it got pushed to 2021?
I haven't been able to get a straight answer on that yet. I will be having a meeting with them in the next couple of weeks to try to hash that out.
Is that a decision for us to make, or is that a decision the hotel is going to make as far as being willing to hold large conventions?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's going to be a decision that they're going to be responsible for making the decision when it's all said and done. But they're also, they're also willing to work with us, right? They're not just going to make that decision in a vacuum. They're going to consult with us too and see how we feel and see how, see what we think we can do.
Also, do keep in mind that the health department has final authority, and if they say it's not happening, that can come, a week ahead. So you just have to kind of be aware of that too.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I want to talk with them about, is like to make sure that we don't get caught with our pants down at that like close a juncture. Like, I'm gonna talk with them and be like, we really need to make a go or no go decision, 10, 12 weeks out at the least, preferably more if we just know that it's not going to happen, right? Like, the earlier the better, because it gives people more time to change their plan.
The main issue I think this time is going to be flights. Unless there's another big scare, I don't know how accommodating airlines are over here, since I'm still getting used to everything in the US.
Yeah, I don't like when we initially pushed back in March, which I guess was a good idea because the entire damn building was closed in the beginning of April. When we initially pushed back in March, like most of the airlines were being generous with rebookings and adjustments without any fees, but I don't know if that's going to continue to last or if it's already not a thing really anymore.
Most of them are still offering rebookings through the end of July. I expect that to continue to roll as things progress. Personally, I keep getting pings from United for my flights to Australia. Hey, we're pushing your rebooking into August because it's international. They're cutting domestic pretty hard at July 31st right now.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, then I'm sorry I haven't been keeping up with the airlines, so I appreciate that. That gives me another reason to, when I talk to them, to be like, hey, let's try to set a deadline for, like the second or third weekend of July if we can, so that we can give people an opportunity to rebook their flights and not leave people in lurch. Maybe I can convince them of that. I'll try.
I think they should
regarding
probably go for it.
Regarding airlines, a lot of times it's actually if you book your ticket by a certain point, regardless of your travel dates, that's how they've determined whether or not you're eligible for fee waivers, to try and get people to book now. So keep an eye on that. But generally, that's how a lot of it goes for domestic flights.
Right.
If you book now, basically, it doesn't matter who cancels or for what reason. You won't get a refund, but you will get, you can have the credit for whatever.
Okay, so I don't see any questions yet in the meeting text chat.
Actually, a bit of a question. Have we started negotiating for 2021 dates?
Not yet. We were supposed to start that like probably a couple months ago, but with the entire building being shut down and basically everybody being temporarily, not working and just being home, they just like everything's been on pause. So like all their sales staff, all their like service staff have not been in the office, so we haven't been able to really make any progress on that stuff yet.
That's fair.
Is there any news to report as far as hotel room reschedules or reg, different reg level reopening or any?
No, not as of yet. That's actually something I do need to sit down with Crash Doom and company. We need to figure out how many cancellations we've had, so that we can figure out how much inventory we can reopen for the upgraded registration levels.
Yeah, those are primarily the kind of the two main themes as far as questions I get online. So right now, I just tell everybody that I have no information to give them. Of course, when we originally sent out the announcement about the postponement, the GSR hadn't closed, Nevada hadn't closed, so that's a viable excuse. But people seem to be under the impression that since we're in phase 2, everything's back to normal and they should have answers. But
we're trying too.
The other main question I've been getting quite a lot recently has been, when do hotel rooms reopen? How do I know if my room's been moved? And 3, why won't the GSM respond to my emails? And I really don't understand why people don't understand the third one.
Yeah, I mean, well, at this point they've been back for a couple of weeks, so I would hope they've been able to start responding to emails, but maybe they're still just so backlogged. I don't know.
The weekend they reopened, they were 100% capacity.
Oof.
I believe it, considering how many people we saw.
Yeah, not even a little surprised.
Yeah, you actually went there. You and Josie, I think, went there on opening day, right? Like, what was that like?
We were there 8:01 a.m. Everyone was trying to make a big celebration out of it. 8:01 a.m. when they opened, everyone had face masks. About 10 a.m., nobody had face masks, except the employees.
Well, that didn't take long.
It
took people literally 2 hours to forget to wear their face masks.
Yep.
Pretty much, yeah. And on top of it...
Boy, that's all kinds of comforting.
It took about also the same amount of time to start reeking of smoke again.
Yeah, I guess there was probably a brief, beautiful time when that building actually didn't smell like cigarette smoke.
Yep.
If people just wore their damn masks, it would never smell like cigarette smoke.
People would find a way to smoke through their fucking masks.
I've seen it. There's like 10 GIFs of people smoking through their masks. One of them cut a hole in it and stuffed the cigarette in there. That was really impressive.
I believe that there are
where there's a
masks
will, there's
from
a way.
1918 that were like, here, smoke through your mask. A century ago. So people will definitely find ways.
Why am I not surprised?
Husky, I see your little concern about that you posted here in the meeting about pre-reg staff potentially being a disease vector, and we're planning to address that. We're definitely going to be stocking up pre-registration and registration with as much sanitizing and other equipment as we possibly can.
I would also recommend from a health and safety standpoint, since I have 4 years of pharmacy, you do want to put some sort of barrier up. You'd see at the supermarkets, you want to put some sort of barrier up between, your registrants and your staff to make sure that they're not in a direct line contact for that.
That would be something would be very wise to have.
So you can do that also with stacking tables and plus the plexiglass.
Yeah, there's also the possibility we might be able to just rent something from like we might be able to rent plexiglass barriers temporarily instead of having to actually like physically make them.
Oh, it doesn't have to be very.
Maybe if we have to physically make them, it won't be that bad because we probably only need about 30 of them. But
there's clear plastic tarp type material rolls that you can, run between poles or stuff like that. I think at a certain point, not to be Debbie Downer, but we have to ask ourselves whether it's worth trying to throw an event like this when, certain precautions like this are worth taking every year at every con going forward. But other ones, we have to be, I think, closer to 100% okay than 50% okay. You get what I'm saying? Like borderline okay, we should be able to kind of get away with this. I'm a little wary of trying to throw an event under that kind of environment. I think we, and that's something we're going to have to consider over the course of the next few months.
Yeah, I agree with that, but ultimately, there is still a contract, and it's still like unless something else makes it so that we can renegotiate that contract, like we still have to come up to the terms of that particular contract. Now, the reality of the situation is that it's likely that contract would be renegotiated if things do get bad, right? They don't want to be in the news as the source of a new outbreak. Nobody wants that.
So should we also start asking people who are coming from either at-risk states or other countries to actually not attend and refund them? It could become a local con if we have to oblige by the contract and keep the infection limited.
If we have to stick to the contract, like as written, that wouldn't actually help at all. It's more likely that we'll just be able to make adjustments as needed as we get more information, because I think that the GSR is also interested in not having an outbreak in their space as much as possible, as well as keeping us around for future years.
I understand that, but they're also allowing people to have no masks, so it's kind of a not clear where they're going with this. They have to cater and not enforce things.
One of the things that I see for kind of doing a local versus non-local kind of enforcement is there's going to be so many loopholes that it's going to be hard to police that. Somebody's been in the country for a year, but their ID is out of country.
That's fine. I'm not saying like we have to be hard ass about it. I'm just saying if it's announced, most people who are planning to come from like Germany or Europe or Mexico would just go like, well, we're not coming because it's too much of a hassle, and we'll come next year.
Well, anybody who's in that kind of situation, like we offer refunds to anybody who wants them. Period. No questions asked. No reason needed.
I understand that. That's not my point. My point is to actually notify them that it might be better if you guys actually did not show up this time. To be fair, they probably would not be able to show up because the airlines will not allow them to go on the planes. There is like a ban from the government right now from like EU, for example.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Is proactively reach out to them and say, hey, like if you're thinking about canceling, you probably should just go ahead and do it.
Exactly.
So there's a question in the meeting chat. How would the larger events be handled with social distancing in place, such as the Fur Festival and main stage events or panel rooms?
That's a very good question that we haven't really figured out yet. That's something we're going to have to actually sit down with like the like actual health department and be like, what do we need to do? How is this going to work? Can we even do these things safely? And some stuff like perhaps the Fursuit Festival may have to just be scrubbed if we're stuck having to continue with October.
So there's been some publications that started to appear about masks and the BLM protest apparently not causing infections. It seems like just wearing a mask handles most of the risks, and the social distancing, it's now unclear whether or not it's actually all that necessary. So that would be a thing to enforce, like Icon says, to enforce masks in the public areas, in the meeting rooms, and so on.
Yeah, but all
Let me
those are
step in here real
outside,
quick.
you know.
Yeah, those were outside, and also this is not really the place to be debating on things that are still being studied. We will abide by whatever health department rules are, and if we think that more is needed on top of that, we can discuss that. I also want to point out that at this meeting, we've kind of, for anybody who's going to say, do we have a plan for X, Y, and Z? We're kind of coming to the point where this is where we're starting to build those plans. So we probably don't have a specific plan for that item yet. What we're here for now is like, okay, now we're probably going to be having this in October, or we have to assume that we will. So now is the time to actually start talking about some of those options. I just see a couple of questions like that in the meeting chat.
And what Verdago said is 100% correct. Most of this stuff is most of those kind of questions don't really have answers yet because everything is still evolving.
So this isn't a question from the chat, but masks as swag, that's totally cyberpunk, just saying lol. Like, I guess those fabric masks that you can get with custom patterns and stuff.
Yeah, that's certainly a thought, especially if I'm not saying we're going to, if we ended up with choosing to have our own policy of you must wear a mask if you are physically able, then providing them to people would certainly be something that would really be in our best interest if we're going to choose to require it.
From a comfort perspective,
and obviously you can't require everyone to wear one because some people physically can't, but that's why I said everybody who can.
From a perspective of dealers, then, as Damek was saying in the chat as well, enforcing masks where possible would be probably the best thing, given that it is always extremely busy in the dealer's den, as well as enforcing 6 foot separation where possible and completely eliminating the queue to get into the dealer's den. So doing barcode things and come back at exactly this time to get in, or any time after that, assuming that we're in.
Yeah, and the come back at exactly this time is also an idea I've been kicking around in my head with regards to registration as well. That might be a way to help eliminate lines there, as well as for the dealer's den.
From the registration perspective, we should sync up at some point after this, along with Morse, and just go over what options we could potentially do for contactless registration.
Yep, I would agree. And let's be real here. Like even if things are bad enough that October ends up getting deferred, most of the stuff that we're discussing and most of the ideas we're kicking around are probably good ideas regardless, just because con crud is a thing.
Yeah.
And the more we can fight that, the better.
There's another chat. Would this mean that we need to lower how many dealers we have?
Well, so our dealer's den has generally had a fair bit of empty space in the middle for people to kind of hang out. So that might give us enough margin that we can, temporarily for a year, use the room in a more traditional, like just rows and rows of tables layout. But that would, if we distribute that free space amongst the whole room, that might turn out to be okay.
Assuming we look at the table sizes again, stuff like that, we may be able to, again, as you said, move things around so we can fit everyone in while still maintaining like a 6 foot separation. But there may then be potential restrictions on how many assistants dealers can have based on their table size, which would be unfortunate. It would probably also rule out people sharing tables.
Yeah, another possibility is having one-way aisles, which not everybody's going to obey, but at least probably most people will.
Yeah, it's not been very effective at my local Walmart. People tend to just meander wherever they want, unfortunately.
You can, however, you can set up like the the rollout barriers, like for guiding people through to up to like a bar or something. Those types of pull-out ones. Yeah, those.
Yeah.
You could do something like that, and have people post it for one way.
The thing with that is it's fantastic when it works, but it requires a human element there to help guide people by example. I've seen tons of systems like that put up to try and get people to funnel in a certain way, but for the most part, unless there's a little nudge, it doesn't work. So
Okay.
it have to be posted with those lines that are in one way and at least act as a first filtering mechanism.
Could we just install spray bottles that are hooked up to motion sensors, so if someone's going the wrong way, they just get a no-no spray?
I vote for that.
Yes. I like this.
As long as it's also a spray of alcohol so that they get sanitized in the process.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Right in the eyes.
Right, yeah, then it pulls double duty.
Just like it happened to me.
Recreate Dip from Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Please present ID card and open your eyes so I can spray you in the face.
Courtesy eye bleaching for free after leaving the adult section of the dealer's den.
So if anybody wants to actually build that, it is dystopian, so it's totally in theme.
Oh yeah, it's right. You got a point.
I feel awkward about this, but I am only the dealer's den second, so I don't know if I have a say in that.
I mean, we're open to everybody really having some say. That's the point. But also, we're definitely not actually building anything that is spraying people. We're just hopefully just joking.
That was more of a joke on my side.
Yeah. You guys were joking? Aw.
Oh yeah, I was not actually. I was serious about this.
Oh, hey, so speaking of different locations in the con, is there like I'm looking online right now and I'm looking at the floor plans and stuff and how, certain, for lack of a better term, I use the military term I'm used to, decon stations. Is there a wider floor map, or is there other locations that people could be going to and from that the con would technically, like, quote unquote, manage in terms of where their people are going?
This is where the layout kind of doesn't help us here. There is a lot of overlapping paths, and unfortunately, you can't just keep a decent distance between them. There's going to be people against people in a lot of hallways.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. Yeah. I'm thinking like some sort of like hand sanitizer stands or something like that, or like you said, unless there's not really any point of, hey, right side stays on the right wall or something like that.
Right.
Hand sanitizing stations and badge check stations should go literally hand in hand.
They should. The next thing to keep in mind through all of this is these are new behaviors we're asking people to be conscious of when they come into our space. That means they have a total of a few hours to a day to learn these new behaviors and then keep with them as common tasks. Keeping up the sanitizer, keeping with the lines, going the right direction through stuff, making sure to obey signs. And that's hard to ask someone to do on vacation. Like when I go to a fur con that I'm not working at, I want to shut off my brain and just drift in that direction and be a dumb, fluffy animal. Again, it's hard to get people to focus on all of these new rules without a lot of hand holding through it.
That's the theme, man.
We've trained people fairly well, go to the open door. So
right.
If a door is closed, they don't exit out of it. They'll only exit out of the open door. So I don't think that'll be a problem.
Question from the chat. Room parties tend to be packed. How are those things going to work with distance?
That's another one that we'll have to sit down and ask the hotel or the health department. It's entirely possible that those are just going to be a no. Like, they may just be a non-starter this year.
Yeah, those are really hard to enforce.
That
That's
makes
true.
it more.
They are very hard to enforce, but like one way we can at least encourage it is to not have a party floor if we decide that or if the health department decides that dense room parties are an unsafe thing. Like, well, don't have a party floor, that's for sure, but it's not going to stop people doing it in their own hotel rooms individually. Like, the only thing that's going to stop that is hotel security.
So is it something that we actually have to enforce? Is that part of the mandate of the convention?
No, I don't think that's going to be our job specifically to like patrol hallways and check for that. That would be
No,
hotel security.
I was just saying in general enforcing. I wasn't specifying who would enforce that. I was just saying in general.
That would probably be something the hotel would have to make a decision on.
Yeah, if we say they're not allowed, people are going to narc other people out. Don't worry, it will happen.
To be honest, if there's no room parties, the attraction to go to a convention has shrunk immensely.
That's a person to person thing. I know lots of people who have no interest in them, but there's going to be changes that are going to change how appealing conventions are to different people, and there's literally no way around that. And we're not going to compromise the health of all of our attendees to try and accomplish goals here and there. And like we said before, if we get to a critical low of attendees, then we'll work with the hotel as best as we can to postpone or make things move differently. It's just not something that we can really. It's not something worth putting concern into. That if we cancel this, people won't come.
Okay, let me rephrase that. People who are going to throw parties are going to make decisions. For example, I know I'm discussing for my own room parties whether or not we want to make them happen. And so far, the discussion is geared towards this is going to be close party between close friends only. And we're not going to be actually publicly open if we throw one, just because of the risk.
Now, one thing that's nice about close friends is that close friends are able to get in touch with each other. So if somebody ends up testing positive, then at least the information can be disseminated to everyone else who is present. That's a lot of the reason why you're supposed to wear masks in public spaces, because you're around strangers. You're around people that you have no way to get in touch with when you find out 3 days later that you tested positive for COVID-19. But if your only socializing has been with people that you can regularly and easily get in contact with, and if you limit it to a reasonable number and not a huge number of people, then that's feasible.
So you could overstep boundaries and ask people who throw room parties to actually register every attendee that goes to the room party, so that they are able to contact.
I think that's something that each individual room party would have to do on their own, because that's not something we can require.
That's not even something that's going to happen when people get liquor in them. They're going to forget. They're going to write something wrong. They're going to get belligerent. It's not going to be reliable.
It's not something the con can easily facilitate either, even from a technical standpoint. Doing something like that, managing it securely, the con would then be responsible for doing it. It's not.
That's what I'm worried about. But it could be a useful service otherwise outside of just BLFC. So for people to keep track of what's going on. If it was centralized, people, double check afterwards if something happened.
There are the other mechanisms to do that. So
ultimately, we're going to have to this is again health department questions.
The fact we're discussing this makes it really not healthy to actually run during Halloween, especially with the resurgence we're seeing in some of the states.
It's just this is just in case I'm sorry, what was your name again?
It's okay.
No, not Amenephis. The lead. What's his name? I'm sorry.
Tycho.
Tycho?
Oh,
yes.
Tycho. Yeah. I think Tycho was saying, if if the situation is right to where people are, laxed, then there's no reason for the hotel to change the contract, and then they're kind of bound to that contract at that point. The con side is bound to that contract. So essentially, it's if the virus is still bad enough, then the hotel will have enough reason to say, okay, we need to renegotiate the contract.
Right. That's how that works.
Yeah.
And there's even language in the contract that specifically says more or less that. And it also says that if it becomes illegal, inadvisable, or a couple of other things, it becomes unsafe, illegal, etc., then the contract is basically null and void and or needs to be renegotiated.
Yeah, which in this case is required by the CDC and or the state or local health department.
Right. Yeah, that's not a call either of us can make. That's the kind of call that has to be made by the health department.
It's worth conveying to the hotel as well that we're a volunteer-run organization. We don't have a full-time staff of paid, with benefits employees who can enforce lines and walking direction and this, that, and the other thing. I mean, they need to know. It's possible that if things are not, ideal come October, that a significant number of the people we'd be relying upon to enforce the rules and the social distancing guidelines and hand out the masks and whatnot won't even want to attend. So.
Right, and I'm going to make sure to bring that up too.
Yes,
I think a fair piece of ammunition to hold in your back pocket is just, look, you have a lot of people that come here. You know that. We know that. Do you really want to put this many people at risk, and do you want your hotel to be put in a negative spotlight by the media?
I think that some people might be coming at this from the wrong angle. We have not had any issues working with the hotel so far, and I don't think that we're anticipating any issues working with them going forward, at least at the moment.
That's correct. I don't anticipate any problems. We've had a good rapport with them for a long time. If it's in both of our best interests to change the plan, that's what's going to happen. Right? They've always been good about working with us in that regard.
Have you talked to them already for the option of pushing that more in the future already, or is that something you haven't started discussing?
I've started that discussion, but we haven't finalized it yet.
Yeah, so right now it's too early to decide what kind of procedures. If we can push back, it might be better to just have the con next year in that case.
Right.
And agree with them.
Currently, it's still a wait-and-see approach. And then I'm going to go back to them with that news from Blizzard Fox regarding the airlines. I'm going to go back to them and say, hey, can we please try and get this figured out by at least the middle of July so that people can rebook their flights if we decide to cancel it or defer it. I guess cancel's the wrong word. It would be a deferral.
So another question from the chat. For the game room, a lot of games are multiplayer or close together, as well as people using the same consoles. How would we handle that?
We might be able to use plexiglass barriers between the players, and they might still be able to see the actual game screen itself. Okay, such a thing might be possible on the arcade games too. Otherwise, I mean, controller cords are typically 6 feet long, so I suppose in theory they could both be 6 feet away from the console and therefore be more than 6 feet away from each other. But other than that, I don't really have great ideas on how to accomplish that.
Yeah,
unfortunately, we're going to need to wipe down and sanitize the hell out of controllers and everything all the time.
I don't know that we have the bandwidth staff-wise to be sanitizing arcade machines in a room the size of ours and the controllers and everything else between players.
No, I would say we
really
don't.
it's not a viable option. Yeah.
Actually, guys, you guys remember back in the old internet cafe days, back when they'd have headsets and stuff that sat next to it, and they'd have the alcohol wipes and stuff there. Maybe if you put the alcohol wipes next to the video games, just tell people to wipe their stuff down when they're done using it. Let them on their way.
That would rely on. We'd have to.
It's the same thing as stated previously. You have to give them that nudge, or else they're not going to.
Yes, but there's also an implicit looking at this from a legal standpoint, it creates something of an implicit admission of responsibility of the con if we're saying, hey, we're putting this here for you on a high-risk item. You're using this at your own risk. If someone gets sick and it gets traced back to the room, they may go, okay, this was a bad idea from the get-go. Why did you do this?
Yeah.
Stores do the same thing. I don't understand the problem. Like you go to Walmart or any place, they will have the sanitizer there. It's for you to use.
The sanitizer is for a metal part. We're talking about an arcade machine, which we don't necessarily own. The owners may not even be okay with us doing it.
That
I happen to know the owner of those machines, and we would be able to work that out. But
the thing is, as the owner of arcade machines and pinballs, those click buttons, the arcade buttons, they're pretty sensitive to liquid. So if someone goes hog wild with the sanitizer wipes, they could get into those buttons and damage the clickers inside. And they're about $45 a piece for those buttons ish.
We're talking alcohol or water there, because alcohol is the way to get rid of water from electronics.
Well, not necessarily. In certain standpoints, yes. Alcohol, like 91% isopropyl.
We're getting off
alcohol.
into the weeds here.
Yeah.
We need to
Man.
rein this in.
So
My idea was so
another
much better till other people started talking. Made me feel bad, but yes, I retract my statement. Thank you.
Another thing in the chat, in regards to large gatherings, the theme is dystopian future. Why not broadcast throughout the convention only to the website with live updates so people can tune in that way? It will break up the large rooms and staying in theme.
More live streaming is what that sounds like.
Yeah, pretty much. And then use a Twitch/Mixer style way of donating for larger events like Who's Line, etc. If we have to keep with smaller populations in the rooms.
If you're talking about like if people are going to the con still, but then we're saying like maybe don't go to the biggest events, the hotel might actually have a feed into a certain channel that they might allow us to use. I know some conventions have done that.
We looked into that in the past. The only way they will allow us to, and we started to try to do this a couple of years ago, to be able to broadcast to one of the TV channels in building, and they weren't super comfortable with the idea. We offered the possibility of having a master abort switch and like a 10-second time delay. And they were more comfortable with that idea, but I think the final answer ended up being that if we were to do such a thing, we would have to provide such a switch, and we would have to pay a hotel AV staff their normal working wage of $40-50 an hour to sit on that switch or to sit with their hand perched over that switch. And that became, in that context anyway, of trying to stream main stage for people to not have to leave their rooms, in the context of not having people being sick or worried about disease, that didn't make sense. But now it might.
Were they worried about like a family from Sacramento tuning into the channel in their hotel room kind of
Right,
thing?
because
I'm much more worried about the ones from Iowa.
anybody can see it, not just our con guests.
So is there a way we could reapproach this discussion with the hotel now, or is it even worth doing that now that everything's happened with COVID, to see whether or not they'd be more amenable to that and potentially allowing a dedicated AV staffer from the con to have control over that kind of switch?
Sorry, that might be a possibility.
Another one. Is the con putting together a best practices repository for the conventions that they'll be hosting prior to BLFC? Or is there even a nationwide sort of best practices list?
That's a good question. I don't know of any such of a list yet. It's probably state specific still. But I guess that wouldn't necessarily stop a best practices list from being put together, with the, of course, with the caveat of, this may vary by state. You have to check with your own laws.
Hey, sorry about this. I gotta get out of here. It's almost 10 o'clock here, and I've got to go some grocery shopping done before the store closes. So I'll talk to you all later.
Thanks for joining us.
For sitting in.
Wear your mask at the grocery store.
Wash your hands.
He already left.
So another comment from Spuds. Could we put a server on the hotel network so people could connect to it without flooding their outgoing bandwidth? So opening, for example, atcon.blfc.org or something like that. So it's not on the TV and it isn't potentially accessible by
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be the better solution than to have a TV, is to have like a captive portal of some kind that people can connect to, and then we can make sure that access to that captive portal is only available to registered attendees. Right? They have to put in their convention registration first, and it checks that they've actually paid for their badge and picked it up before it will allow them to even use that link or access anything in it. And I'm sure, like Crash, that's perfectly viable, right? To have the single sign on and then also confirm, yes, this person is both paid and has picked up their badge.
Do that with the current OAuth system we've got for the Rive system.
That's what I figured.
I think we're at the end of the questions in the chat.
Yep. And yeah, like they have plenty of internal bandwidth. Their outside world pipe, I remember their IT guy telling me they have a 1.6 gigabit outside world fiber optic line is the total bandwidth in and out of the building. And of course, we still managed to bring that to its knees. But yeah, like if the streaming was within the convention, within the hotel itself, that would obviate a lot of those problems.
The hotel's giving us less bandwidth on the public Wi-Fi than they're actually have.
Well, remember, they got to take that bandwidth and they got to carve it up to every function that's in the building. So, like, yeah.
I'm assuming that's also going to all the network-connected gaming machines.
They are on a separate network because that would be an absolutely terrible idea to have them on the same network.
Yeah, in many cases, they're not actually connected to the internet at all. They're connected to completely separated systems, some of which still run on old, like, permanent, like, basically a permanent phone call. You know, they're running on an ISDN line that's been active for 30 years.
So saith the engineer who maketh the machines.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool that how isolated that stuff is.
I mean, yeah, it's crazy when you think about the fact that typically they have about 2,400 slots on the floor, and a lot of the newer ones are on network, even just to verify player card numbers.
I did see a couple people in the chat commenting that it's possibly a DHCP running out of leases rather than the actual bandwidth, and I agree with that. I had the same observation. Yeah, so it might be their public Wi-Fi is literally just running out of IPs to assign people rather than running out of actual bandwidth.
Get there really early and never drop off the Wi-Fi.
Good luck with that.
Ascend, become static.
I did have one other quick thing in the discussion topics for the meeting that we didn't touch yet. That was the question about fursuit tags and which departments have historically handed them out and which ones might be interested in handing them out. Because, yeah, I think we're going to be we are doing fursuit tags. We already have them. That's that wristband thing that's at the end of the agenda. By the way, for anybody who joined the meeting late, there's some pictures of the swag at the end of the agenda.
How do you find the agenda? Sorry.
Go to the...
It's pinned in the meeting chat, the hashtag meeting.
I've just reposted it again for reference.
Yeah, Discord has text channels and voice channels, and you need to go to the text channel named meeting.
Is it the right place to ask questions about the generator or not?
Yeah, we can talk about that. I had a feeling you were going to want to talk about that during this meeting. So yeah, please go ahead.
So the department that does the decoration has joined the generator. It is a makerspace downtown Reno that seem to like the furries very much, and they would like to see if we're interested in being more like a permanent fixture with them. And so the question is, first of all, is there any people who would be interested in that kind of space as furries to come and do stuff? It's a place where you can build steel, wood. It has 3D printers. It has CNC machines. It has a laser cutter. All kinds of really cool stuff. So the question is, where are we going to go besides doing the decorations going forward? If we want to make them become part of our landscape with BLFC.
So, comment from the chat on that. What's the cost an hour membership?
So the cost, if you go just by yourself, it's either 25 or $50 a month. But this is talking about us becoming partners with them, and so we would have discounts as furries. Usually, members get half off on like classes, like if you want to learn how to weld or how to sew, that kind of stuff. They have like experienced people that are willing to teach you, and they're really cool people.
I think if I remember right, they were interested in some of people from our community doing, if they're willing, doing some sewing and costume making classes there, right? Or running some classes.
Yeah, I mean, so they have like a professional seamstress that's like 30 years of experience that's there, and she finds the fursuit stuff really cool. She actually helped me make a pattern for my fursuit that I'm building right now.
Yeah, so it sounds like this is the sort of thing where like we have like a couple of people that can be in there at a time, or does each person still have to end up buying their own membership? They'll just be discounted.
I'm not quite sure yet. That's something we would have to discuss, but I would like to get a feel of the interest of like the community to see if it's something worthwhile for the locals to pursue.
I'm so down.
Yeah, I get the feeling there's probably a lot of locals who would be interested in having access to a space like that and
I know a
getting
bunch.
discount said access.
So I think it's worthwhile to when you come with me, then to discuss with them this perspective and how we can make that work, and then we'll have more to share with the community. I personally will want to teach Arduino classes there. I think so part of my contribution to them.
Wait, I missed a little bit. Is this Bridgewire you're talking about?
It's not Bridgewire, it's the generator. It's the other one.
Oh, okay. Because there's someone that's responsible for a Prometheus poster being up in Bridgewire, and I still haven't figured out who it is.
If you know who it is, I'd be curious to talk to that person, and I want to also check out Bridgewire at some point.
It's a decent space. The $50 a month membership, I don't know how that stacks up with what Generator is doing. What I will say is that Bridgewire has some more infrastructure. I don't know if I'd call it more. They have a lot less space, but they have more when it comes to like metalworking stuff. Well, again, like it's hard to quantify. The everything in their machine shop for metalworking is working is a good way to put it. Because last time I went to the generator, and the last few times that we went to the generator, a lot of the stuff in their machine shop has been in various states of disassembly or general disrepair.
Yeah, it's a very alternative space. It's interesting. It's I'd say it's very queer also in some ways.
But yeah, like I've been interested off and on in helping the generator get their machinery up and running because I know how to get a lot of that machinery back into working shape. It's just been a matter of like now there's a pandemic, right, and a few other things that were going on.
By the way, the generator is going to be moving. They lost their lease, and so they've been negotiating. And by fall, they'll be in a new location. So they're actually trying to reinvent how they're going to organize the space, by the way.
Okay, good to know.
But the thing is, they really like us, so we would probably have a very good relationship, and we can probably negotiate something that would work for us, and maybe work for them too. Really.
Right, but this sounds like something that can be discussed a little more in depth after the meeting or something.
I agree. So the main question for me was if it seems like there's a lot of people that might be interested, and that's what I wanted to gauge the amount of interest.
A lot of the people are not going to be interested because they live nowhere near there.
I mean, it sounds like you got enough interest from people just mentioning it to proceed in other forms.
There's also nothing stopping this from being a thing that like the convention helps make available to local furries. They don't necessarily have to be volunteers of the con. Part of the mission of the convention is to build a community, and that certainly would fit within that mission.
That fits with my idea of my intent.
Yeah, this is a thing you could bring up and propose to the local community as a whole, and not just the con volunteers.
I agree, but I'm not gonna have the BLFC hat doing that unless I get approval from BLFC.
Well, that's why we're going to go have that chat with the generator, with a rep from the generator next week. We'll know a lot more by then.
Cool. Well, at least people know that that's in the works. Awesome. That's all I had to say.
Yeah. So it certainly sounds like, at least at its heart, the interest is there. There's probably enough interest, I would guess. So I have the circling back to the fursuit tags topic. I have the following. I have these departments noted down so far: Flare, Conops, the charity table, the con store usually sells some of the fursuit tags. The attendee service animals. Oh, forgot the fursuit festival. Duh.
ASA is kind of hand in hand, but Gophers as well. Though I think Gophers are going to be pretty busy.
What is
ASA? Has handed them
I'll lump those together for the purposes of fursuit tag handouts.
Yeah.
What is ASA? It's not something I've heard passed around before.
Basically, just volunteers, usually Gophers, who go around and interact with attendees. They'll do things that are theme related.
I mean, like what does it expand out to? What are the words?
Oh, attendee service animals, I believe was the thing.
Oh yeah, they're the ones that wear the little service animal tag on their vest.
If you were there last year, they were the ones who were wearing the white vests.
I was there, but I was in ops almost the entire time, so...
Oh, there was an earlier question that I noted down that I forgot to mention. Elevators. How are we going to handle queues of both attendees and non-attendees getting into the elevators to make sure that we maintain appropriate distance?
This is something that's going to hinge heavily again on health department guidelines before I can start laying out a plan of how to separate people and keep people safely loaded into the elevators. That's just going to be something we inspect further when we're farther along into this and we have a more clear view on what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, with as much as the guidance on COVID-19 has evolved over the last 3 months, imagine how much more it's still going to evolve over the next 5 months, right? We continue to learn new things. We continue to have different techniques, different ideas, and even in some cases different products to mitigate this. So it's Like, I want to start formulating a plan now, but the odds are pretty good that that whole plan is just going to get turned on its head, even if we try.
We don't know if there's going to be regulation released specifically that is in regards to elevators and how people function with elevators. So I can't start defining plans until we get that word.
So I'm being told in the chat GSR is currently doing 4 per elevator at the moment. And separate thing, would it then be viable for us to go back to the hotel and ask whether or not we could then use the staircases to move people around, or would that be even worse in terms of a crowd movement standpoint?
It would be worse, but the answer on the staircases is going to be a firm no.
I figure we always ask every single year, and the answer is always the same.
Doesn't stop us from asking again, though.
We can totally ask again.
I figure this is probably one of the cases where we might be able to push the hotel to give us a chance on it.
Well, I mean, they kind of caved partially last year because of a couple of elevators being non-functional, and so they conceded allowing them to be open to some degree, if I recall.
Something that would change a lot of how this interacts is just if social distancing is kept a thing in the lines and I have to start spacing people out a lot more. That's going to suck up a lot more space, and it's going to block a whole lot of doorways, access ways, and we're going to have to start limiting how lines function and how we conceive those ideals.
So
yeah, I don't think people are going to be real thrilled about getting a like come back in half an hour token just to get on an elevator.
Yeah.
That's not going to go over well.
So as a follow-up in the chat, would we have the use of the service elevators again as we did last year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they really liked that, and I have no reason to believe that wouldn't continue to be a thing as long as we have the volunteers to spend on it.
Well, keep in mind,
main thing
I don't know, they might expressly not want guests in the service elevators if that's what staff who are renting random guest hotel rooms are using. You know, if housekeeping is going in a service elevator or room service, then they might decide that's all the more reason not to let us use them. So
No. So here's the
I don't
thing.
think we should take that for granted.
The service elevators are highly monitored. The staff have their own dedicated elevator. The main thing keeping us from using them more is me having the staffers to actually operate those elevators. It's a lot of hours. It's riding up and down in an elevator car, and not everyone wants to do that for a bunch of time. So getting people to rotate through there is challenging.
Well, and so what Wild was getting at though is that because of disease concerns, it's entirely possible that they may change their mind in regards to the service elevators. They might need to keep them quote unquote sterile for the staff of the hotel. Like that might be a thing that would be an issue. So we're gonna have to ask about that this time around. And I certainly hope the answer is going to be yeah, that's still okay. But I think Wild's right. We can't necessarily take that for granted anymore.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Like the disease thing notwithstanding, yeah, they really liked it. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion that they would let us do it again. But now because of this disease nonsense, I'm not so sure.
So at the very least, if we're able to convince them to allow one volunteer to control the elevator and just fursuiters to get them up and down quickly, that would potentially be an alternate route if they didn't want attendees that weren't in basically a semi-sanitized costume, or at least a protection layer between the attendee inside and the outside world.
A fursuit is absolutely not a protective layer, and we're definitely not going to treat it as such.
Yeah, that's been pretty clearly figured out in discussions with other conventions. We've all pretty much come to the agreement that a fursuit head is not a mask and does not count as one, and a fursuit body is not it's not considered a substitute for any other kind of protective gear. I'm even wondering if it's actually worse than wearing regular clothes in some instances, which is another thing I need to sit down and talk with the health department about.
Some fursuit heads have the fan that blows out, so it's going to be doing the exact opposite of a mask.
Right. And then there's also the thought of, I mean, not that anybody's probably going to have the be brave enough to hug anyone anymore, but like imagine 500 attendees hugging one fursuiter. They've all pushed every one of those 500 attendees has pushed their face into roughly the same spot on that fursuiter's body, and so they've effectively all rubbed their faces against each other. Right? That's not good either.
Yeah, this is it's a mess in every corner.
So more from a perspective of, would the hotel be more comfortable just having fursuiters going up and down the elevator than regular attendees? In the service elevator, I mean. Not the regular ones.
Perhaps that's something I can bring up if they express concerns about needing to keep those elevators clean or sterile or whatever.
I do apologize. I didn't mean to take it down that route or imply in any way that fursuits were more in that regard, just that the hotel may perceive it in that fashion, in that they don't want a bunch of attendees touching all the walls of the elevators and stuff like that over just having the necessary people going up and down quickly.
Right. Essential people.
Essential. That's the word I was looking for.
On the subject of stairwells, if for some reason we luck out and they actually are amenable to the idea of opening stairwells, I'm also going to propose and see how they feel about the idea of assigning particular stairwells to be up and other stairwells to be down. And obviously they all become down if there's an alarm or there's a fire thing. But for, the back and forth usage, trying to designate a stairwell as up only and trying to designate a stairwell as down only so that people aren't crossing each other. I think that might be helpful too. But
that's probably a good option.
That's thinking way ahead of the possibility of them even letting us use the stairwells at all. So we'll see where that goes.
Follow up
I'll
in the
step
chat
in
on
here
that.
for a second and kind of say it's somewhat related that this is basically just for the leads and the staff, that we should all start looking at various things for our departments, whatever might make sense with your own experience. Like, I know how ops works. I've already made up an alternate layout plan and a couple of other things. Everybody who's a lead for a department, look at your own space and just find if there's what problem areas you think you'll have, what issues might come up. That should be kind of our a bit of planning thought over the next month or so.
Yeah, to clarify, Verdaga is talking about the making plans for disease mitigation specifically.
Follow up from the chat on the stairwells. Perhaps put the security company we hire in or at the stairwells if the GSR is iffy or security concern.
I mean, it's potentially possible. I don't know how you patrol a stairwell other than to walking up and down it all day long, and I don't think there's a lot of people who are really physically capable of basically spending 8 hours doing a stair climber.
I think what they specifically mean is more like at, I guess, the bottom to ensure people are only going up or only going down.
Oh, right. If we tried to do an up only, down only kind of thing, I see what you're saying.
My understanding is that the GSR didn't want us using the using the stairwells because of Las Vegas and security reasons. So it's like if you put a security guard there, we may placate someone.
I've also given them, and I haven't heard back on this, but I've offered the idea of coming up with IP security cameras and a computer to watch them, and just hand that computer to the security office, and like, here's temporary battery operated cameras that can watch the stairwell, and you can keep an eye on them. And will that make it so that we can have them open? And I just proposed that. I haven't heard back on that.
So, I mean, the one stairwell that would be useful to have as a going up one is there is one behind the staff area next to the security office. That would be useful as one going up. So then if something does happen, security's right.
Yeah. I actually don't know which one when they did concede and open one up last year. I don't remember which one it was, but I think if you wanted to go up, I think you had to access it from the third floor.
Yeah, it was the
did
one
not
that was
empty out of the
closest
first
to the
floor.
panel rooms. It was the ones that right at the top of the panel rooms. Once you go right through the doors to the hotel room area, it was that one.
That would probably be where they would want us to go up and down from that point.
That would be my expectation, yeah. And so I think it was funny because people who were on the few people who were sleeping on the second floor, like they went up to the third floor and then back down the stairs by one because they couldn't go up from the first floor. And Spuds mentioned in the chat that any sort of stairwell monitoring would be potentially be a flare responsibility. Maybe if we can afford it, we could hire out for it instead to not have it rest on Flair's shoulders. But that'll depend entirely on bandwidth, and it'll depend on how much money we have available too. And like I said in the updates in the meeting agenda, there's plenty. The con financially is perfectly fine right now. There's really no concern at this time. Like the convention has most of a year's expenses in the bank, and a good chunk of those expenses don't actually hit the con until after the con is over and we have gotten whatever remaining registration money for the year. So, and unless we see a enormous drop off in attendance, we'll be fine.
Question that's come in from one of the Telegram chats. How would the con handle cash payments? Would they still continue to do cash payments or require the use of a card?
So if you take a look at that piece of cash in front of you, you will see that this says this is legal tender for all debts, public and private. That means we legally have to accept cash.
That's actually not quite true, but in this situation, it's still there are safe ways of handling cash. There are places that are doing that. You know, we might have only one till for cash, right, instead of having everybody do it. But it's something of all of the things, handing over cash is actually probably less concerning than just being close to somebody else and speaking with them.
Well, let's be honest here. Cash isn't any dirtier than it always has been.
This is a good point.
Pretty much, it's still 80% cocaine and the rest is feces, so it's the same stuff we've always touched.
Yeah, I mean, but so yeah, my understanding was that verbiage on our money means that cash is always a valid form of payment, and like we are actually legally obligated to be willing to accept cash. It doesn't mean we can make it easy, and it doesn't mean we can't discourage it. But I think we do. Well, maybe I'm wrong.
No.
Rudauge, you might know better.
Yeah, it's a long-held myth. I can't give you the exact details of sort of where the split is and what it does and doesn't mean, but generally speaking, you're not just required to accept whatever somebody gives you. It's more about, I think, the concept of the currency itself.
So from the Federal Reserve's website, it says that although you have to identify it as a valid and legal offer of payment, there's no federal statute mandating that a private business, person, or organization must accept currency or coins for payment for goods or services.
Okay, noted.
We could just charge a hazard tax. If you want to pay in cash, you got to give us an extra $10. It's going to the charity.
And someone in chat says, it's cyberpunk year, credits only.
That's great. At one point, somebody suggested to me as a theme thing a while back of having a a kiosk playing essentially a video that looks like a sort of an AI assistant or whatever that's accepting your ID and processing your registration, when in fact there's actually a physical person behind that screen. But then that actually might be a fun way to theme the concept of putting a physical barrier between the congoer and the person processing their registration.
If you had a soundboard or something like that, that would be kind of cool as well, like a robotic voice or something.
Yeah, or well, really, it would just be a set of pre-recorded videos, and then the pre-reg staffer would just trigger those videos as they run through the steps of getting their registration. I think we potentially still have enough time to bang together something like that if we wanted to.
Multipass?
Yeah, pretty much. Please insert multipass.
Lido Dallas Multipass.
Oh, I guess, yeah, we might not be able to actually use the term multipass. That might be, I don't know. That might be okay.
It's a convention. It's fan fiction, right? It's legal.
It's so generic you'd think that it would not be copyrighted or trademarked.
Remember, copyrights and trademarks can be implicit. They don't always have to be registered. However, I don't know if that would qualify. I'm definitely not a copyright lawyer.
To check the U.S. Patent Trade Office. Give me 2 seconds.
If it helps, they're referring to multipass from the movie The Fifth Element, if you're not familiar.
So there is one live trademark for multipass.
Yeah, but there's a random company that's called Multipass or something that has nothing to do with the movie. So you're probably
Printed
in the
surgical needles. So you
I
probably
don't
are
think
cool.
that us having
Not-
that on a screen for a couple of days is going to be a problem, whether it's trademarked or not, to be quite frank.
But everybody has to say Multipass.
Was just saying.
It is an omnipass.
Well, regardless, we can come up with a solution. But that might be at least a fun way to manage the idea of having a physical barrier for people, and maybe we can come up with other clever ideas like that on how to at least theme the cleaning efforts or theme the barriers. I guess we're pretty much at the end of this conversation for the day. I don't really have anything else to bring up. Does anybody else have other stuff they want to talk about?
No.
For the screens, we can probably find cheap stuff by the roll for transparent.
Tycho, do we want to talk about Charity League?
Well, that was something that, we're still kind of trying to. I'm still interested in trying to find a person to be responsible for that. Have you been doing any? You probably haven't been doing any searching.
No,
I'm
I've
guessing.
been on hold.
That's what I figured. I didn't have anybody specific in mind either, but maybe you can start trying to see if you can ask around and see if anybody might be interested in that.
Yeah, we also talked about Tycho earlier in the week. Various ideas we might have for keeping in mind the Black Lives Matter theme, and whether it's a panel and various other things. I don't know if you wanted to bring any of that up here, or maybe work on getting a team together to help organize a panel, that kind of stuff, or hold that for another.
You can spearhead that if you want. I would be fine with you just doing the legwork of trying to see if we can hunt down people to do such a panel, such an event, and get more dialogue going. I would appreciate it.
Sounds
okay,
good.
Gentlemen, I'm out of here for this evening. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
I want to like kind of finalize by saying that like while we are technically still on for October, with the way the infection rates are going up in Nevada now instead of down, and the reopening plan has I think already announced that it's been delayed by at least a week, and it might get delayed more. Like every time that happens, it's just increasing the odds that we're going to get deferred again. So that's why I want to hedge our bets and make sure that we are not doing anything that is October specific yet until we have a little better idea of how this plays out. But much of what we need to do is not October specific, and much of these concepts in terms of disease mitigation and attendee safety can apply regardless of whether COVID just completely evaporated overnight and just suddenly wasn't a thing. Like, con crud is still a problem, and it's still a problem we should be trying to fight, regardless of whether or not COVID-19 is a thing.
Any further questions from the chat?
One thing to think of is like headless lounges, because that's probably a breeding ground for everything. So how do we deal with that long?
Yeah, that's another health department discussion.
Water stations as well, which would again probably be a health department discussion.
What happened to the discussion with the UV lights and the headless lounge and stuff?
That was just people throwing around ideas in the break room chat. But
it was
theoretical.
At least from my end, it wasn't even talking about using them. Just, hey, look at this interesting technology.
Yeah,
I
wouldn't
the potentially
trust
human safe ones are really expensive, so that's not happening.
Yeah, and I wouldn't try, even if we could afford the potentially human safe ones. I have no idea what it would do to someone's fursuit or their stuff. So we definitely wouldn't want to expose people's fursuit parts to anything like that. I did like the idea of adding like sanitizable trays that we can put on top of the head rack, so that you can quickly and easily ensure that it's sanitized basically every time. But I don't think that's going to stop somebody from just slapping their head on a shelf.
To be honest, I don't think this is the main problem. You putting fans, basically moving air around, and this is an airborne virus.
Yeah, and when you do go in that room, you can feel the air moving around.
Right. And again, that's why I need to sit down with the health department and be like, this is how this is done. This is how these operate. Is this going to be a problem?
I would say, if anything, you just don't provide any fans at all, just the room. And then you sanitize the tables.
So, just as a reminder, it's not technically airborne in and of itself. It is only through respiratory droplets and people touching surfaces and stuff like that.
Yeah, but the amount of airflow that is coming from that will move airborne droplets. So
yeah, and it's very much not just surfaces. They've been very clear about it being more of an airborne transmission.
By the way, I have a little story to tell about fursuit lounges and head drying racks. Way back in our second year, when we still had a PVC pipe tree as our head drying solution instead of the current chrome racks that we have now, that was the year where we literally zip tied a tub of Lysol wipes directly to the trunk of that tree. Like, you could not miss it. And over the entire course of the convention, I think like 10 wipes out of that tub were ever used.
So would using something like an air filter, if you did potentially use fans, still be of any effect? That's probably, again, a discussion for the health department, but
I'll make note of it.
if you're talking about like you could have a system where the air that flows over the heads then goes into a filter, but if it doesn't work in that order, it won't do anything.
Right.
So it has to be like, air drawn from room into enclosed sealed box with head and then out through a filter, basically, if that's your concern. It's also just people being around and panting and stuff is also going to be a problem, and just having air circulating in the room will be a problem.
In the enclosed box, you would need to have one on the intake and one on the outtake to stop anything that's already on the head getting out, and anything that's outside getting into the head.
It would really just be on the exhaust, because you can consider the air in the room itself to be this like the same level of cleanliness that it would be in any other room if you were filtering whatever was exhausting off of fursuit heads. This is all speculative, though.
We could buy a used Cobalt 60 food gamma irradiator and just use that.
Do we have the budget? Let's do it.
I don't think that actually does anything. I'm not sure if that does anything for viruses, actually. That might be a bacteria only kind of thing.
As Dragon said, let's not have the fursuits glowing.
Flare is not trained in nuclear response.
But it's
So
also
basically-
indication that they've been meaning to get.
So you would use HEPA filters out of the fans, basically.
I mean, we might not, but in general, if you were trying to filter something out of the air, you have to draw the air away from the thing emitting whatever the issue is, and not so like away from people and then through a filter. Yes, but
Of
again,
course.
it's kind of speculative at the moment.
Yeah. It's a big mess. There's a lot to think about, and like we're going to need a lot of guidance from the health department to give us an idea of like what's safe, what isn't. And if they come back and they say, well, this is unsafe and this is unsafe and this is unsafe, and then you take those things away and you don't have a con anymore, well, then we have an argument we can bring to the hotel and say, hey, like this is going to have a meaningful impact on making our event not what it's supposed to be, and that's going to make a lot of people not come, and it's going to make the event unworkable.
As a note, the CDC basically tells like hotels and stuff like, hey, maybe rethink your HVAC system, which is ridiculously hard to do and extremely expensive and not something we would ever have any part in.
I thought they actually did that for hospitals that they converted into, hotels that they converted to hospital, like field hospitals, like changing the way the air circulation goes.
Yeah, they would, and they pay a lot of money to do it.
That was the corps that were doing that. Like engineering corps or something that were doing that for the army.
Sure, it still costs a lot of money regardless of how those people are working, right? It doesn't matter if it's a person in uniform from the military, they're still being paid.
I'm not saying it's free. I'm just saying like they seem to have like a solution. Like let's just do this and it works.
Right, but has the GSR gone through that? My belief was no, but I'm not.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect them to be making those kind of big changes for something that at least back in March looked like it was going to be relatively short-lived. It's proving to be not the case now, but back in March when they would have made those kind of decisions and worked on it while they were closed, like that's not a thing that would seem like it'd be worth doing.
So, but all we have to be reminded is we have to work around what GSR has. So, like, tell them to modify or anything. So we have to take what they have and see how we can, make sure we're safe. But that's all we can do.
So I guess ultimately we just have a lot of research to do.
Yep.
A lot of waiting, a lot of prepping, making sure that we're prepared for either October or potentially deferring.
And I do hope people understand too that like this is unprecedented for any con to have to go through this. Like this is new stuff, so there might not be things that happen at the con because we can't find a workaround for it. So
That attendee safety comes first.
yeah, it might be real basic conventions, but hey, I'd rather people be safe and be able to come to another convention again, when things get figured out.
Yes, indeed. Okay, we don't get to play games with people's lives. It's just that's a non-starter.
Yep, priority number one is the safety of everyone.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Good talk. I appreciate all the input. Got a couple new ideas that we can look into, and I hope everybody stays safe and healthy.
All righty. Good night, everybody.
Stay healthy.
Hey,
good night, all.
Here's something we could do. VR headsets for everybody, and we have a virtual.
The RE was a virtual con, I believe.
Another one, but
Several.
better with a.
We would actually have standing to, insert ourselves in the biggest conventions list, unlike the other one.
Make it multi-engine, so you have it on like not only VR chat, but you also have it on Second Life, and you have it on. Oh gosh, is Furcadia still around? Freemuck?
Logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
All right, take care, guys. I'm out.
All right, see you.
And gals and everybody else.